y'all, it's Jalathea. Welcome back to Black Diaspora Talk. So as you see in this video, we are going to be talking about the question of, are Black people cursed? And what's the meaning of the quote-unquote curse of Ham, all right, that's been taught in so many different religious sectors. So before we get into this video, feel free to like and subscribe to this channel. You can also follow us at Realm of Alchemy on Instagram, all right? So why were Black people led into slavery? Was it really because the color of our skin? Why are we Black anyway? Well, according to every main religion and past historical law and practice and teaching, Blacks were considered to be Black because of something called the curse of Ham. We'll get into who Ham is momentarily, as well as what the curse is that they have claimed to justify not only slavery with, but the brutal beatings and murder of Black African slaves. So this was used to justify many murders and atrocities to Black people in the name of God or Allah. So where did that come from, and who believes it, this curse of Ham? Okay, so this mainly came from Jewish doctrine of the Talmud. Christian teachings also upheld the Black skin and slavery was justified through the curse of Ham. It was taught in Judaism and still perpetuated in the Talmud that Black skin comes from the curse of Ham, which is can be found in Genesis chapter 9, 20 through 27. So who was cursed by his father? Ham was cursed by his father Noah, according to the Bible, for quote-unquote seeing his father's nakedness while Noah was drunk. So it was taught during slavery and well into 2018 and even now. The Jewish Talmud describes Black people as being Black and in statuses of servitude and not the nicest of people and not the nicest of looking people, almost like we're second-class citizens. So it was also taught, thanks to Aristotle, that many Europeans wanted to avoid being sent to the colonies. So they went south towards the equator and they were quote unquote blackened and therefore became inferior. Think about that. It was the Aristotle teaching that many Europeans wanted to avoid being sent to the colonies. So they went south towards the equator and were blackened, therefore becoming inferior. So in other words, they're basically saying white people turned Black because they migrated towards the equator. Let that logic sink in. I know and have seen plenty of white South Africans living in South Africa for maybe 50, 60, 70 years, have been living there for plenty of years, and have not turned Black. That doesn't make sense. The logic doesn't make sense, because if a white person is in the sun for a prolonged period, they tend to burn, tend to turn red. They don't turn Black. They don't gain melanin by being in the sun. Okay, so that logic, anyways, we're moving on. So, one story in the Babylonian Talmud describes God cursing Ham, and he became quote-unquote smitten in his skin for committing a sexual abomination while on the ark, and another story describes Ham being cursed for castrating his father. So Islamic concepts upheld that Noah's curse on Ham's descendants includes blackness, slavery, and not letting your hair grow past a certain length. Okay, so ironically, the story of Ham and the drunkenness of Noah is not mentioned in the Quran, which is the Islamic holy book. So also, if Noah was a prophet, according to Islamic teaching, then it wouldn't really make much sense for him to have been drinking alcohol anyway. But let's continue. So devout Christian and founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, Joseph Smith, published a book entitled, quote-unquote, the Book of Abraham, where he goes on to describe an Egyptian king whom he refers to as a Hamite. Now, Hamites are the descendants of Ham, the son of Noah. But even more so, descendants of Canaan, Ham's son, which are called Canaanites. So remember, if you are a descendant of Ham, you are a Hamite. And if you are a descendant of one of his sons, then you take on their name. And his youngest son, Ham's youngest son, was Canaan. So Canaan's generation became known as the Canaanites. And they were still by nationality Hamites as well. So Ham's son Canaan, who were called his people were called the Canaanites, he also described them as being black and cursed by Noah, barring them from joining priesthood. Okay, according to Joseph Smith, this is why blacks can't join priesthood, because the Hamites are a cursed people. Okay, according to him. So the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints later regarded this as scripture, particularly in Mormonism. All right, but the Christian Church upheld this belief. Therefore, black men were barred from priesthood until 1978. So up until 1978, black men could not become priests. Okay, they could not until 1978. That's what, 2-3 years from 80. So this was recently, guys, like 40 something years ago. Like this was recently. Okay, so it was also taught that going against slavery is going against the will of God. That was also upheld in Christianity. So although there was a denouncement of the curse of Ham teaching in 2013, let me repeat that. Although there was a denouncement of the curse of Ham teaching in 2013, the essays are not made easily accessible and open to the public. Therefore, there's a lot of, that's still upholding that these racist ideologies are true, to the point to where the Book of Abraham by Joseph Smith is still considered scripture in the Latter-day Saints Church. Let that sink in, y'all. Nobody talks about that. But this Black Diaspora talk, so we're going to talk about it. So let's continue. Other Protestant denominations were teaching that the mark of Cain was dark skin to justify the transatlantic slave trade. So they went from the curse of Ham to it being justified through the mark of Cain, which they said was dark skin. So many Baptist churches taught that Cain was marked with black skin, and therefore there was a separate heaven for blacks and whites, which they later recanted in 1995, which was only 26 years ago. Okay, so now, in their eyes, to uphold their racist and brutal history of enslavement, colonization, murder, and forced conversions, they upheld these things about, the curse of Ham and the mark of Cain, to justify slavery and all of these horrible atrocities they were doing to people with dark skin. So, all this talk about Ham, we're probably wondering, those of us who probably didn't grow up in the church, or those of us who did grow up in the church, and the church didn't go into too much detail about who these people are, the question might come up, who is Ham? So, if you did grow up in the church, you probably are familiar with the story of Noah and the flood. Ham was one of Noah's 3 sons. The other 2 were Shem and Japheth. So Ham's descendants, again, were called Hamites. Japheth's descendants were Japhethites, and Shem's descendants were the Semites, or the Semitic people. You probably heard that term, because if you're anti-Semitic, it really means to go against descendants of Shem's people. Okay, so Israel or Muslims, things like that. Semitic people are descendants of Shem. So, however, although you may be familiar with the story of Noah and the flood, what they probably didn't go too much, what they didn't get into too much detail about, at least from my experience growing up in a traditional Black Baptist church, quote unquote, is just what it meant when Ham saw his father's nakedness. Because that is what we were taught. Ham saw his father's nakedness. His father woke up from his drunken stupor, found out what Ham did, because Ham went and told his brothers, and therefore his brothers put a cloth on the back of their neck, and they went backwards inside the tent and covered up their father. So because Ham saw his father's nakedness while his father was in a drunken state, he went back and told his brothers. And when Noah woke up and found out what Ham did, he cursed him for seeing his nakedness. Okay, that's what they teach us in the church. All right, but they really don't go into detail what seeing his father's nakedness really means, because as a child, I could not process my mother cursing me because I walked in on her naked. Okay, so Why did Noah really curse Ham, and what did it mean when Noah divided up the land and gave it to his sons in portions? Like, that whole story of Noah and the flood and after the flood, it wasn't really described went into much detail when it was being taught in the church, in the Baptist church, when I was growing up, at least from my experience. It wasn't really taught. It was just Noah, he had to take one of each animal, male and female, and had to take his 3 sons and his wife and his sons' wives, bring them in the ark, and they were on the ark for 40 days, 40 nights, and they came off the ark and they had to repopulate the whole world again. That's pretty much how it was taught when I was growing up. Okay, we didn't really go into much detail about his sons and about the blessings that he gave his sons and the cursings that some of his sons had. So let's talk about that. Okay, so why Noah cursed Ham? Now, the birth order of these 3 boys is debated by scholars, but most scriptures mention them in this order. Those scriptures refer to Ham as the youngest in Genesis chapter 9 verse 24 and Japhet as the elder in Genesis chapter 10 verse 21. It gets confusing, but you have to study the scripture and even grab the Apocrypha. Okay, so this story is important, particularly a big reason why this story is in the book of Genesis, meaning quote unquote beginning. Okay, this is the main reason why this story is in Genesis, because this does start one of the new beginnings. Okay, so because remember, they were responsible for repopulating the earth after the flood due to the angels having sex with humans and animals and creating giants, and the giants were killing mankind, and it was a mess. Okay, so God you can say he quote unquote purged the earth to start anew. All right, but that's a whole nother topic for another video, talking about demons and giants and mermaids, because it's real. All right, definitely real. So what they taught in Christianity. So again, ironically enough, the curse of Ham theory was not only taught in Judaism, but also taught in early Christianity and in Islam many times to justify slavery and mistreatment of Black people worldwide in all of these major religions, which translated down to the government and law. So what exactly is the curse of Ham? Well, after the flood, Noah was in his room or tent, in other words, in his own space, asleep from being a little too tipsy. He was drunk. Okay, need I remind you that it was only Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, Ham, Japhet, and Shem, and their sons' wives, totaling 8 individuals who were on the ark. So Ham went into his father's tent and quote unquote saw his father's nakedness. And then he went to go and tell his brothers, Japhet and Shem, who then took a garment and walked backwards in their father's tent to quote unquote cover his nakedness. So if they have to cover their father's nakedness due to their brother Ham, then it's safe to say Ham uncovered his father's nakedness, saw his father's nakedness. All right. Now, what does that mean? Okay, because in the church growing up, from my experience, I literally took it to mean, because they taught it to mean, he saw his father naked, and he went and told his brothers. But what does it really mean to see your father's nakedness? Because we can't take a 21st century mindset and apply it to a people 2,000 years ago. All right. So in the church, we are literally taught that he saw Noah naked, and Noah woke up and figured it out and got mad and cursed him. Why would Noah get so mad that his son saw him drunk and naked and told his brothers it would render a curse? And let's be even more real. The curse was not put on Ham, but in reality, it was put on his youngest son, Canaan. So why would Noah curse his grandson because his father, Ham, saw him drunk and naked? Why he gonna curse his grandbaby like that? For his father's mistake. So what's the truth? Who is Ham? And did his father really curse him for seeing him naked? Again, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism taught that Ham was cursed due to his father seeing his father drunk and naked, consequently being marked with black skin and being servants/slaves all their lives to their brothers. It's a pretty harsh punishment to be cursed from your dad. It's just a pretty harsh punishment for your dad to curse your son because you saw him naked and drunk and inform your brothers, right? Okay, again, you cannot apply today's terminology from a 21st century people and apply that to people 2,000 years ago, especially for those who don't pay attention to context, or those who read the Bible as 100% literal or as an inspirational text that can be applied instead of as history. So again, Noah did not curse Ham, although it was Ham who, quote unquote, saw his father's nakedness and informed his brothers. He did not curse Ham. He cursed his son Canaan, Ham's youngest son Canaan. So again, it tells us after Ham did this, he told his brothers, who went back, backwards with the garment into the tent to cover their father's nakedness. So Ham uncovered his father's nakedness. So again, what does that mean? In Leviticus, it tells us just what seeing your father's nakedness really means. So Leviticus chapter 18, verse 7 says, "You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness." And verse 11 goes on to say, "If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death." Now, we know just what covering our father's nakedness means. It tells us right there. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. Okay? And if a man goes on to lie with his father's wife, then he's uncovered his father's nakedness. So, why wasn't Ham and his mother put to death? Or his father's wife? Because, okay? Remember that this story took place in Genesis, which is the beginning, okay? This did not become law until Leviticus. This became Levitical law to the Israelites, and it probably became law because of this reason. All right? So Ham slept with Noah's wife while Noah was passed out drunk, who was probably Ham's mother. But it didn't really say the naked. It didn't mention anything about the nakedness of his mother. So, regardless if that was his mother or not, she was most definitely his father's wife. And because he lied with her, he uncovered his father's nakedness. That's a no-no. Okay, even in today's time, you don't sleep with your father's wife. Come on now. So Ham slept with Noah's wife while he was passed out drunk. And, of course, he went and told his brothers, who in turn took the garment, went backwards in the tent, and covered their father's nakedness, which was their father's wife. And there's also strong context, especially in apocryphal works, that she was probably impregnated by Ham, which is probably why Noah cursed Canaan instead of Ham. All right. So if she was impregnated by Ham and had Canaan, that's a pretty big reason to curse Canaan instead of his son or even his own wife. Because remember, in some instances in Genesis, it refers to Canaan as being brothers of Shem and Japheth. But then it later goes on to refer to Shem and Japheth as Canaan's uncles. So if Ham did, in fact, impregnate his father's wife, then from his father's wife's point of view, it could be, Shem and Japheth's brothers. But from Ham's point of view, as it being his kid, they could also be his uncle. So that's also something to just really point out, okay? So Shem and Japheth, again, went backwards. They covered their father's nakedness. So it would make sense, again, we're looking at scriptures to see why Ham, who was not really cursed himself, but in fact his young son Canaan was cursed. His youngest son Canaan was cursed instead of him. But in Christianity and in Islam and in Judaism, they call it the curse of Ham. And they say that Ham and all his descendants were cursed. All these black Hamitic people were cursed. But only Canaan was cursed. Therefore, the Canaanites, Canaan and all of his descendants, the Canaanites, were cursed by Noah because of this sexual immoral act that Ham did with Noah's wife. So, Canaan, ironically in Hebrew, literally translates to mean humiliated. Okay, so remember, Canaan didn't do anything. Canaan was the product of what was done. So instead of Noah cursing his own son Ham, who did the immoral act, he cursed the product, which was Canaan. But why hasn't the church taught us this? That Noah's son Ham slept with Noah's wife, who was possibly Ham's own mother, which is why it later became Levitical law that this is wrong. Remember, Ham did this before God gave Moses this law to make to the Israelites because of what their ancestors did. Now, you might have some of those hardcore Bible thumper Christians that will try to debunk this with other scriptures like in Exodus and Habakkuk and that mention the word nakedness without looking at context. Like in Genesis 9, it specifically says Ham saw the nakedness of his father. In Exodus and in other chapters, it says your nakedness and their nakedness, talking about other fellow men, Israelites, other fellow people in regards to themselves and lusting after the other men or people. It makes no mention of kinsmanship or of a relative or of a man's father's nakedness, just themselves or other men in regard to one another, not their households or other kinsmen. Not mentioning anything about their father's nakedness, unlike Genesis 9, where it specifically pointed out that Ham saw his father's nakedness. And then Leviticus goes on to tell us what it means to see your father's nakedness. So, Ham's sons and daughters were called Hamites as a nation, though they would have their own tribes named after each one of the sons of Ham. So Ham had 4 sons. He also had a wife that he brought along the ark. Now, why didn't Ham lay with his wife instead of laying with his father's wife? I don't know, okay? But let's get back into it. His sons, he had 4 sons, Put, which became known as modern-day Libya. Then you have Mizraim, which became known as Egypt. You have Cush, which Cush consisted of most of Africa back in those times because Cush was the eldest son of Ham. All of his land they referred to as Ethiopia. And Canaan, he had modern day Israel and Palestine and Jordan area, all right, which was a part of North Africa. So all of his sons, all 4 of his sons together would make up the landmass of Africa because that was the blessing that Noah gave Ham. Now, remember, Ham was not cursed by Noah. His son was because of what Ham did. But Ham was still, before he done that, he was also blessed. Even afterwards, he was also blessed by Noah because Noah had given him the landmass known as modern day Africa. Whereas Japhet got most of the upper part of Asia and Europe. And Shem got most of Western Asia close to Northern Africa. All right. So again, Put, Ham's son, is modern day Libya. Mizraim is modern day Egypt. Cush is Ethiopia, which back then consisted of most of Africa, because remember, he was the oldest. In Canaan, he had the Israel-Palestine area, which was a part of North Africa at that time. So, and even still today, it's only separated by a man-made canal, but that's another topic for another video. So all his sons and generations were known as Hamites. So all 4 of his sons were known as Hamites, and all their descendants were Hamites by nationality. But when his sons, Put, Mizraim, Cush, and Canaan had children, their children took on their name. So, for example, when Put had children, they were still Hamites by nationality, but they were also Putites. Same with Mizraim. They were Egyptians. The sons and daughters of Cush were Cushites and later Ethiopians. The sons and daughters of Canaan were Canaanites, all right? So why did they call it the curse of Ham when it was Canaan who was really cursed? And how did they associate that with black skin and slavery when all of the sons of Ham, which were called Hamites, were black people, and so were the sons of Shem, which nobody wants to talk about? The land of the Hamites were given by Noah, which again was the landmass of Africa. Japhet was given, remember, European territory, Central Asia, and Shem was given Western Asia and the parts bordering Northern Africa. So think about it, because there was black people. It would make sense why the man they called Jesus was able to escape to Egypt from Israel and blend in with the Egyptians. Because remember, Israel is the land of Shem. Egypt, the land of Ham, the Hamites, the black peoples. So if the man they called Jesus was able to flee Israel because they was after him, Herod was trying to kill him. He fled Israel, Judea particularly, and fled into Egypt because he blended in with the Egyptians. He's not going to go there if he don't blend in. Obviously, they know he's not going to belong, but he did that because he blended in. They looked alike. The same reason why Moses, who was a descendant of Shem, was able to be called the son of Pharaoh without question in Egypt, even though he was a Hebrew Israelite. He looked like the Egyptians. Same reason why Joseph was able to rule over Egypt after his brothers. Remember, Joseph was an Israelite, Hebrew. Same reason why Joseph was able to rule over Egypt after his brothers sold him, because he looked like them. Throughout biblical history and world history, the Israelites were known to have fled to Egypt and into Africa because they looked alike. And those were descendants of Shem, were fleeing into the territories of the descendants of Ham because they looked alike. It even says in scripture that the Israelites mixed with the sons and daughters of Ham for over 1,000 years, including during the times that they were enslaved in Egypt. So much so that the Israelites were mistaken for Ethiopians at times when they would migrate. They called it the curse of Ham to simply justify slavery and the mistreatment of anyone with black skin. How can the Canaanites be representative of every dark-skinned person in the world when having dark skin is a dominant human feature, and therefore most of the population has dark features, meaning hair, skin, and eyes? Also, they claim the Canaanites went extinct long ago. So how can their descendants still be living today? According to them. So are we a cursed people? As a whole nation of black people? Honestly, yeah. But not because of the curse of Canaan, who was a Hamite, son of Ham. Before explaining all this, let's just take a quick moment to unpack who Noah and his sons were and the job they had. Now again, I am not affiliated with Christianity anymore. Like I said earlier in my last video, I did grow up Baptist in the Baptist church all my life. All right. I'm in my 20s, mid-20s. So, I've up until a year ago, I've decided to leave the Christian church. And there's so many reasons why. Okay. So even though I was raised in a Baptist church, this is how the Christian story of Noah goes. So although the Christian story does not give the full account in Genesis, you'll need to check out the book of Enoch for those details on this story, which they took out and removed from the Bible. To make a long story short, Noah was a man from a chosen bloodline of chosen people of the Most High God. Yes, a bloodline, because the Bible is written by and for a certain group of people whom are all related. They kinfolk. So Noah was favored by the Most High in a time where the Most High was disgusted with the filth things going on in the earth, such as angels having sex with women, creating giants, angels and men having sex with animals and fish, creating all types of beasts and creatures, including mermaids, and sex spirits such as incubuses and succubuses, men murdering and raping one another, and men having sex with children. And it was just a lot going on. So you can look at it as God purging the earth to start over. So he instructed Noah to build an ark, take his family, which consisted of his wife, their 3 boys, and their wives, and to gather every living animal, each being each species, male and female of each species, and take it with him on the ark. Despite what Christianity teaches, the ark was not built overnight. It took Noah years to build the ark. So the Most High warned him years in advance, like literally years, because Noah was pretty old when he died, like 900 years old or something. So once the ark was complete, Noah did as instructed and gathered who and what he was instructed to gather on the ark, and the Most High sent a flood upon the earth 40 days and nights. After the end of the flood, Noah was instructed to release the animals and allow his sons to repopulate the earth. They were each blessed with a landmass. Ham's name in Hebrew literally translates to English to mean hot. Ham's children are described as dark as a raven. Ham's children were all given land masses that were in the landmass of Africa. All four of his sons represented a region of Africa during that time, because that was their blessing that was given by Noah to their father Ham. So remember, again, Ham's sons, Put, which represents Libya, Mizraim, which represents Egypt, later known as Kemet, Cush, which represented most of Africa, which they called Ethiopia. Remember, Cush was the oldest, so he got the most land. And then there's Canaan, the youngest son of Ham, who got modern-day Israel, Palestine area, which was a part of North Africa. All right, it was not the biggest land because, Canaan was the youngest, but it was the chosen land. All right, so Ham's sons were given the landmass of Egypt because Ham was given the landmass of Egypt by his father Noah. Whereas Japhet got European territories in upper parts of Asia, and Shem got Western Asia, which is more closer to, Egypt and Northern Africa. So Ham's children, although they look similar to the children of Shem, enslaved the children of Shem during several periods of time throughout history, and vice versa. They were enslaving each other despite being cousins. All right. So, but they didn't look at it like that, because they looked at it as, there wasn't no racism. Okay. Because a lot of them looked alike. It was more so divided by tribes. Okay. So black people, such as black Americans, are not just descendants of Ham. In fact, it was his other brother, Shem, because remember, they looked alike. A lot of Shem's descendants fled into the descendants of Ham's territory to blend in and to flee persecution from the invasion of Israel. So hear me out now. Interestingly, to be anti-Semitic comes from the descendants of Shem. The Bible, though the church will probably never address this fact, was yes, written by men, but not ordinary regular men. Chosen men who were actually all kin to one another, related. The Bible was written by one group of people for that group of people. It follows a specific bloodline, a chosen bloodline. Shem had a son named Arphaxad. Follow me here. Shem had a son named Arphaxad, and Arphaxad had a son named Shelach. Excuse me if I mispronounce these names, okay? But follow me. Shelach had a son named Eber, who became the father of the Hebrews. So from this point on, the descendants were also called Hebrews of Shem, from Eber on forward. So Eber had a son named Yoktan, and Yoktan had a son named Peleg, and Peleg had a son named Yen. Yen had a son named Serug. Serug had a son named Nahor. Nahor had a son named Terah, who had 3 sons. So Terah had 3 sons. He named one of his sons Nahor after his father. He named his other son Haran, and he named his 3rd son Abram, whose name would later be changed to Abraham. Emphasis on that Ham at the end. Abram was a descendant of Shem, need I remind you, but his name is later going to be changed to Abraham. We'll see why later. Another video. Tune in. So let's keep going. Haran, which was one of the sons of Terah, was killed by Nimrod, who was the son of Cush. So Nimrod was a Cushite, and he was the king of the landmass of Africa at that time. All right, so Haran had 2 daughters, Sarah and Milcah, and he had a son named Lot. Need to remind you, Haran was killed off by the king Nimrod due to his father lying on him, Terah. So Haran's children became married off because per Levitical law, Haran's brothers, which is Nahor and Abram, they have to now take his daughters as wives since their brother is now dead, and they have to assume his, So His daughter Milcah became the wife of his elder brother Nahor, and his other daughter, Sarah, became the wife of his brother Abram. So this was per Levitical law. This was a Hebrew custom. Okay. And same thing when your brother dies and leaves behind a widow. If he was married, then one of his brothers would have to have married his wife per Levitical law. That's Hebrew custom. So Abraham and Sarah were married, but Sarah had, and need to remind you, Abraham really loved Sarah. He thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world. So Abram and Sarah were married, but Sarah had a hard time conceiving. So she took her Egyptian slave as a quote unquote surrogate, you can say. She let her Egyptian slave Hagar lay with Abram, and Hagar got pregnant, and she called her son Ishmael, who was half Hebrew Israelite and half Egyptian. But Abraham did not love Hagar at all. Like, he was not interested in her. Like, when Sarah got upset with Hagar and Sarah wanted to cast Hagar into the wild, Abram was like, okay, I don't care. Like, he really did not care. So later on down the line, Sarah ends up getting pregnant by Abram. Need to remind you, Abram already has a son, Ishmael, by Hagar. So later on down the line, Sarah ends up getting pregnant by Abram, and they have a son named Isaac. So he's the pure Hebrew Israelite. Because remember, Sarah is the son of Abram's brother Haran. All right, which Haran and Abram are both Israelites. All right, Hebrew Israelites. So Sarah is also a Hebrew Israelite. So their son Isaac is a pure Hebrew Israelite, unlike Ishmael, who is half Israelite, half Egyptian. Isaac has a son with his wife Rebekah named Jacob. So Jacob's name is later changed to Israel by the Most High God. He has 12 sons, and his descendants are known as the Israelites, or the infamous 12 tribes of Israel. Now, God made a covenant with the Israelites through Moses, hence the law, such as the dietary law, the moral law, and the Sabbath laws being established in the Levitical law. So he made this covenant to be their God, and that they must not go lusting after other nations and gods, and that they must keep the law. And in turn, he will continue to bless them as he delivered them out of Egypt. So they agreed, and they did that for a while, but then they began to do what they wanted to do. They got invaded by other nations, so they began taking on other nations' customs and traditions. So they were warned what would happen if they did not keep the law, and they were promised God promised to bless them if they did keep the law, as they were being blessed, because they were blessed for a long time. They were made kings and rulers and things like that, but they became a stiff-necked people. A lot of them started being hard-headed, and they just did what they wanted to do. So what would happen if they transgressed the law that they promised to keep? Well, just as if you get blessings for doing the right things, you also have consequences that come with, doing the opposite of what you said you would do. That's just no different than when you sign a contract. We all know that's a legal binding document. Once you sign a contract, you have to fulfill the requirements of that contract. And if you don't, you have to suffer the consequences that are outlined within the contract. That is the same thing as a covenant, even way more sacred than a contract. So when you break the terms of the covenant or of the contract, you have to reap the consequences and repercussions that were outlined in that covenant or that contract. So the Most High said that they will be cursed until they turn away from the way of the heathen, meaning other nations. So just how would they be cursed? It outlines that in Deuteronomy. Once again, feel free to look at the whole Deuteronomy 28. Feel free to look at that in its entirety on your own. However, I'm going to point out, for time's sake, some of the highlights of Deuteronomy 28, and I want you to think about them, okay? So again, I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I'm just going to point out some curses in particular that should sound familiar, all right? So again, Deuteronomy 28, 15 through 68, and I will be paraphrasing. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes which I commanded thee this day, that all these curses shall come up on thee and overtake thee. Cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. The fruit of your womb will be cursed, and the crops of your land, and the calves of your herds, and lambs of your flocks. The Lord shall send upon thee curse and vexation and rebuke in all that you settest thine in your hand to do, until you're destroyed, and until you perish quickly because of the wickedness of your doings, where you have forsaken him. The Lord shall make the pestilence disease cleave unto thee, until he have consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. The Lord shall smite thee with consumption, and with the fever, and with inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with a sword, and with a blasting, with a mildew, and they shall perish. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thy enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and shall flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And your carcass shall be meat unto the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall freight them away. The Lord shall smite thee with madness, blindness, and astonishment of heart, and you shall grope at noonday, and be blind in the darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and you shall be only oppressed and spoiled even more, and no man shall save thee. You shall betroth a wife, and another man will rape her, and you shall build a house, and another man shall dwell therein. You shall plant a vineyard, and you shall not gather the grapes thereof. Your sons and daughters will be given away unto another people, and your eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in your hand. The fruit of your land and all the labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt possess, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed always. So that shall you be mad for the sight of your eyes, which you shall see. The Lord shall bring you, and thy king, which you never known, shall set over you unto a nation not you or your fathers have known. And ye shall serve other gods of wood and stone. Wood and stone. Think about that, y'all. You shall become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. What's a byword, y'all? Let's keep going. You shall plant vineyards and dress them, but shall neither drink of the wine nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. You shall have sons and daughters, but you will not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. The trees of the fruit of thy land shall locusts consume. The stranger that is within the land shall get up above you very high, and shall come down very low. That stranger shall lend to you, and thou shalt not lend to him. You shall be the head, or he shall be the head, and you shall be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you, and shall pursue you, and overtake you till you're destroyed, because you had not hearkened unto the voice of the Lord your God, to keep his commandments and his statute which he commanded you. And they shall be upon you for a sign and for a wonder, and for thy seed forever, meaning your descendants. Because you have not serviced the Lord God with joyfulness, with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things, therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon your neck until you have become destroyed. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of old, nor shall favor the young. And he shall eat the fruit of your cattle and the fruit of your land until it's destroyed, which also shall not leave you corn, wine, or oil, or increase of your kine, or flocks, or sheep, until he hath destroyed you. So that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eyes shall be evil toward his brother, and toward his wife, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. The tender and delicate woman among you, which will not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eyes shall be evil toward her husband, and toward her son, and toward her daughter. If you do not fully and carefully observe all the words of this law that are written in this book, that you may fear this glorious and awesome name of Yah, then the Lord will make thy plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and of long continuance, and of sore sickness, and of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon all the diseases of Egypt which thou was afraid of, and shall cleave unto thee. Also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thee be destroyed, and ye shall be left few in number, whereas ye were as the stars of heaven of multitude, because thou would not obey the voice of the Lord God. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do you good and to multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught, and ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people from one end of the earth unto another, and thou shalt serve other gods which neither you or your fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shall you find no ease, neither shall thy sole of thy foot have rest, but the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind. And you shall live life hanging in doubt before you, and you shall fear day and night, and shall have no assurance of your life. In the morning you will wish that it were even, and at even you would wish it were morning, for the fear of your eyes wilt thou fear, and for the sight of your eyes which you shall see. And the Lord shall bring you into Egypt again by ships, by the way thereof I spake to you. You shall see it no more again. And you shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no one shall buy you. These are the terms of the covenant the Lord commanded Moses to make with the Israelites in Moab, in addition to the covenant he made with them at Horeb. Now, I hope I haven't lost anybody here, but with logic, reasoning, and research, and discernment, it is very evident to see who these curses of Deuteronomy 28 apply to. When you look throughout history, and you look at one particular group of people throughout history who these curses have applied to consistently as a people, the state of the average Negro is described in these curses. Not on an individual basis per se, but as a whole, as a people, as a nation. Look around. We are a stiff-necked and hard-headed people, but we are also a powerful imagination. As a whole, as a people, as a nation. Look around. We are a stiff-necked and hard-headed people, but we are also a powerful imagination. As a whole, as a people, as a nation. Look around. We are a stiff-necked and hard-headed people, but we are also a powerful imagination. As a whole, people. The price of our melanin is literally priced higher than gold, over $300 a gram. Just to what length do you think another nation will go to keep a nation who is worth more than gold at a low vibrational state? To keep them from truth? To enslave them and take away their heritage so they don't remember who they are, so they continue to thrive at a low vibrational state? That is the only way that they can win, is by poisoning our mind. And once a lie has been taught and upheld as truth for so long, the real truth comes next to impossible to even fathom. How do we fix this on more than just an individual basis? Therefore, how can we as a people prosper, as a nation? Because other nations do it, why can't we? They set up shop in our communities and take that profit that they made off of us and go back to their own communities with their own people and put the money back towards their own community. And other nations and immigrants of nations, they come here and they gain all this money. And what are we doing? We're still at the bottom of the barrel as a nation, as a people. So how can we fix this? Subscribe to this channel, share this video, comment, interact somehow, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the taboo topics. Let's talk about the toxicity of Christianity and religion. Let's talk about the history and current state of colorism, racism, misogyny, toxic masculinity. Let's talk about Black economics and the state of the culture without judgment and criticism and insult. I hope to see you in the next video, y'all. Shalom.